Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Mirror Dungeon solo video. Today we'll be using the Bone Claimer himself, Bamboo-Hatted Meursault. He's a pretty interesting character, being one of the first of what would be considered leader-type identities. His main strength comes not from anything he can do in particular, but instead from the fact that simply by existing, he gives any other Blade lineage identity a massive power buff to both their poise generation and their coin rolls. Of course, because of this, when he's by himself, he loses a significant amount of power, as he can never buff himself without the Blade lineage dying first. Though this doesn't make him completely useless without any teammates. His clash power and damage are still really good, and of course, who could forget about the claiming of bones? Bamboo-Hatted Meursault's skill 3 is easily one of the most unique skills in the entire game. Yield My Flesh is a negative coin skill, despite the fact that he's not a negative coin identity. This is because he actually wants to lose the clash whenever he uses it. If he does, he will follow it up by using Claim Their Bones, one of the single strongest attacks at our disposal, and aside from his buffs, the single reason which makes him so good. The hardest part about activating the skill is the fact that Yield My Flesh rolls a minimum of 12, which unless you have the special ego gifts of Old Dovo Robe or Lucky Pouch, can be quite difficult to actually lose a clash with. Most enemy skills either never roll higher than 12, or if they can, it's never guaranteed, so actually pulling it off is usually a 50-50. The only way to really guarantee it is for him to tank a really powerful attack that would usually end up killing most other characters. However, thanks to his passive giving a single turn of invincibility, and his inability to get staggered when using Yield My Flesh, he can always do this at least once per fight. Starting the run off, we pick these starter buffs and choose the cigarette holder for our starting gift before picking To Be Cleaved as the first floor. We managed to find Phlebotomy Pack and Lithograph here before making it to the boss against the alleyway watchdog. This little puppy would normally be a pretty difficult fight. We are fatal to both lust and blunt damage, which the dog uses exclusively for the first few turns. Bamboo-Hatted Meursault's first stagger threshold is actually pretty high up, and if this fight was the first fight in the run, staggering would basically be inevitable. Luckily though, we actually start the fight below our stagger threshold, and as such can avoid getting staggered entirely thanks to our healing gifts. After the first couple of turns, the dog actually uses a skill which we can lose a clash to and becomes the first victim of the Bone Claimer. We take tomorrow's fortune and the overused whetstone as our reward and head into emotional craving for the next floor. Here we buy prejudice before making it to the boss against the wayward passenger. With Meursault being fatal to gluttony damage, getting staggered in the first turn of this fight is inevitable. We do actually fuel regret, which can be used to turn off this weakness, but in doing so we also become weak to envy damage, ultimately rendering it pointless. This gives the passenger all of his portal buffs, but they're nowhere near enough to actually make a difference. Some of his skills do actually roll high enough for us to claim his bones, but unfortunately we lose the 50-50, letting him keep his bones this time.
랜덤 서울을 건너 살을 태우는 육천 살을 태우는
기회를 잡았네!
랜덤 서울을 건너 살을 태우는 너무 세게 맞은 건 아니?
야,
다리 아프기 작살났네. 그러면 이제 메타적을 피할 방법이 없지.
오늘이 방금 뭘 본 것인가? 영원의 꿈을.
된다. 사월을 건너. 육참. 깨달음을 얻으셨고.
모자를 쓰고 있는 당신에게 방망이 대신
육참.
정답이에요.
이런 건 몽둥이가 약이지. 그릇 두드려 패.
뼈를 깎는다.
We take the Erd Tree Snare and 4-leaf Clover for our reward and head into Trickled Sanguine Blood for the next floor. Here we buy coffee and cranes as well as an extra skill too before making it to the boss against the Headless Ichthys. Just like with the previous fights, we are also fatal to this fish, resulting in a guaranteed first turn stagger. However, this is far from a bad thing. We take nearly our entire health bar's worth of damage, and on the third turn the fish uses its powerful Blood Cannon skill. A skill that rolls so high it's almost impossible to win a clash against. In fact, did you know that attack power down, the main gimmick of the Headless Ichthys, is technically a buff for bamboo-hatted Meursault? By nature of it being attack power down, it only affects attack skills and leaves defense skills completely unaffected. Take a guess what type of skill to claim their bones is. Attack power down weakens Yield My Flesh, making it easier for you to lose a clash with it, and leaves to claim their bones at full power because it's a defense skill. In fact, you can actually use Meursault's base ego to apply attack power down on himself to make it easier for him to lose a clash. Just make sure you're fighting an enemy with multiple parts when you do this, otherwise you'll also be debuffing them at the same time and ultimately end up doing nothing in the process.
이런 건 몽둥이가 약이지. 그릇 두드려 패.
된다. 사월을 건너. 살을 빼온다. 살을 빼온다.
다리 한쪽이 작살났네.
된다. 사월을 건너.
나만 믿고 답에 집중해줘.
된다. 사월을 건너. 뼈를 깎는다.
쨍그랑 부위가 조각났어. 계속해도 돼.
We take a duplicate and Eclipse of Scarlet Moths as our reward for heading into Refraction Railway Line 2 for the next floor. Here we find Endorphin Kit and buy Nebulizer while also fusing Finifugality before heading to face the boss. Honestly, they should just call this floor the Sign of Roses fight rather than Line 2 because it's the only fight on the floor.
사월을 건너.
This is supposed to be a long fight and it's a single fairly easy boss. Like, at the least put in Wayward Passenger 2 or something, I don't know. Anyway, the Sign of Roses is pretty easy to solo. It only spawns a single flower, which, with all of our skills being pried, it's very easy to destroy instantly. The hardest part about this fight is the fact that it ends up doing fatal damage no matter what, and to absolutely no one's surprise, we get staggered again.
다른 신나. 노래 부르.
We end up on Death's Door, but manage to climb all the way back and beat the fight pretty easily afterwards. The worst part about soloing with Bamboo-Hatted Meursault is that if you're actually collecting Poise Ego gifts, claiming bones becomes harder and harder as the run goes on. Pretty much every single gift either buffs your Poise generation or your Clash power, making Yield My Flesh roll a minimum of 20. We can still end up losing a Clash in this fight, but it relies on the sign rolling heads, which, let's just say, it probably has 45 sanity at this point.
상황이 나빠져.
사월을 건다. 6참.
최종 난국이에요.
된다면 사활을 건다. 6천.
카론, 기다리는 거 못해.
된다면 사활을 건다. 살을 베어내고
좋아, 부위 하나를 박살냈어. 승객들, 저거 깨트렸어.
된다면 사활을 건다. 6천.
이런 건 몽둥이가 약이지. 그릇 두드려 패.
6천.
방금 공격, 다음에 다른 개체에게도 다시 해봐줄래?
6천.
영상으로 남기면 다른 직원에게도 도움이 될지도 몰라.
살을 베어내고
예사롭지가 않은데? 아주 작살을 내놨어.
아까 방망이
된다면
의무실로 갔다
사활을 건다.
괜찮을까요, 돌싱님? 머리에 정이 좀 들었다더라.
뼈를 깎는다.
설마 저거
We take the Angel's Cut and Ruptured Blood Sac for a reward and head into the Evil Defining for the final floor. Here we find the Pendant of Nostalgia before making it to one of the hardest fights against the Politified Pirates.
된다면 사활을 건다.
Despite the fact that we also have Carmilla, which gives us 2 turns for free, this fight was still incredibly difficult for a multitude of different reasons. The most obvious one is the whole backup mechanic, which was introduced with the new Mirror Dungeon. This one mechanic makes it take like legitimately 10 turns before you're in a decent spot, and by that I mean you can actually clash with most skills. Most of the time this is alleviated by either having a powerful AoE ego, or by killing enemies to reduce their sanity, letting you take less damage in turn. Neither of these are an option as 1. Meursault doesn't actually have any good AoE egos outside of the corrosive version of Capote, and 2. These guys have negative points, so defeating them actually makes it more difficult by letting the rest hit harder and more consistently. Capote honestly would probably have been good enough to beat this fight if not for the fact that it does not turn off our lust weakness. Getting staggered in this fight is basically a death sentence, and with our stagger bar being so high, we can take at most like 2 attacks before that happens. Forcing corrosion as well as bone claiming to some extent doesn't even really work, as you'll end up killing half the enemies who will then be replaced with more guys who have even more skills. The best way to get through this is to try and stall for as long as possible. You want to stagger enemies but never actually defeat them until they can no longer be staggered. If you do this and get a little lucky with ego targeting, you'll never actually get staggered, and as soon as there's less than 6 enemies, you'll have won the fight.
살을 베어내고 뼈를 깎는다.
나이스! 하나 제꼈다.
된다면 사활을 건다. 뼈를 깎는다. 살을 베어내고 살을 베어내고 진짜 들이받아주지.
방금의 돌격은 다른 팀에게도 보여줘야겠어요. 그냥 교육성이 많을 거예요. 승객이 딱 한 번 먹었어. 와, 성공했어!
된다면 사활을 건다.
하지 않은 것부터가 시작이랬어.
With that, we make it to the shop and buy imposed weight as well as clear mirror calm water before making it to the final boss against the Pequod trio. Yet again, we have a very common occurrence in this fight. Staggering is inevitable. This is entirely thanks to Starbuck, as thanks to our gluttony weakness and the sheer number of coins he has, it's almost always too much damage. Technically speaking, I do believe it is possible to avoid staggering on the first turn if you turn off your gluttony weakness and they all roll exclusively tails. However, there is an easier way to get out of this. If you simply turn off the gluttony weakness, you will end up dying. However, if you instead use Meursault's base ego, it will give you 5 protection the next turn, plus 1 from the Mirror Dungeon starter buff. A 60% damage reduction is enough to avoid dying, not with a lot of health, but with just enough to survive. The third turn is basically the only opportunity we have to claim bones, as otherwise our clash power would be too substantial. However, doing so would be a mistake. This is also the turn where Ahab is protected by Queequeg, and would easily be able to finish us off. However, Meursault's passive gives him a single turn of complete invincibility as long as you have a 3 Pride Resonance. Fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, we heal so much that Ahab is simply incapable of depleting our health bar. We still needed to do the resonance though to have enough healing to survive in the first place, so unfortunately there was never actually an opportunity for us to claim bones in this fight.
랜덤 서울을 건너 살을 태우는 살을 태우는
앞으로 강력한 공격이 다가올 것 같아.
랜덤 서울을 건너 욕참
이런 건 몽둥이가 약이지. 두드려 패.
욕참 욕참
완벽한 선택이었어, 나리! 선택 약점이 뻔히 보이는군. 기회를 잡았네! 이쪽으로 전화를 꺾어 넘기려면 선택사기가 떨어질 것이 뻔하지! 역하세!
승부수가 먹혀들었군. 판세는 완벽히 우리에게 있었다. 정착지를 찾을 때까지 이 기세를 잃지 않기를.
And that's how I soloed Mirror Dungeon 5 hard using only bamboo-hatted Meursault. He is pretty strong on his own, but ultimately half of his kit is completely unusable and you almost never want to use him without any other Blade lineage identities. He's a pretty fun identity though, but ultimately not the greatest solo unit. Anyway, that's it from me. Like and subscribe to not miss next time where we'll be using this character. Goodbye!